It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Victoire Vietnam, the cause of my early young life. The happiest day of my life was exactly 50 years ago today. And Labour is toast, says Tony Blair's former chief advisor, a Mr. John McTernan, frequent guest of ours. Well, who am I to contradict the oracle that is Mr. McTernan? We'll be looking at how and why it all starts tomorrow. And Donald Trump is running for Pope. Yes. He's not even a Catholic. That would certainly answer the age-old question, is the Pope a Catholic? No, Donald Trump is, well, I don't know what he is, a Sybarite, if that's a church. And Lindsey Graham thinks it's a really, really good idea. He is now campaigning for a Donald Trump papacy. It's all coming up here on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The greatest military political victory since the Second World War. That's how I view the events exactly 50 years ago, when the people of Vietnam threw off the yoke of their oppressor, the United States of America, having earlier had to do the same with the French. One of my prized possessions as a 14-year-old was a French badge which read Victoire Vietnam. It was a long time coming after that. I took the bus from Dundee to London when I was 14 years old in 1968 to demonstrate at what became an historic march and demonstration into Grosvenor Square when the US Embassy was situated there. It became quite a brouhaha, quite an imbroglio. And I never looked back. From the age of 14 until the age of 21, I felt every cut that the Vietnamese people suffered, particularly their children, long before I had children of my own who could very well look Vietnamese. It was an heroic achievement of unprecedented dimensions. No one can actually, now looking back on it, understand how the Vietnamese people, in their tunnels, in their open-toed sandals, with their AK-47s on their back, with their little green pith helmets, the Viet Cong, as they called them, the patriotic forces in South Vietnam, backed by the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, backed by China and the Soviet Union, the latter in particular, managed to defeat the French colonialists in the 1950s, and then on this day in 1975, they drove the United States from their land. You'd have to have been there to have experienced the epiphany as the tank smashed through the gates of the American embassy, as the helicopters took off one after the other, with a huge crowd streaming up the steps onto the helicopter platform of American diplomats, military personnel, and the comprador, the collaborators from South Vietnam that they had spent such a long time developing, and who realized actually when push came to shove, and it was mainly shove off the aircraft, off the platform, plummeting to their death, that in defeat the United States doesn't have a great deal of use for its collaborators. Some of the aircraft, some of the helicopters actually crashed with the weight of the people on board. The American embassy had been busy for the previous 24 hours burning all incriminating material, and that was a lot of material. The scene of these young peasant boys with the Viet Cong flag, blue and red, smashing through the gates of that embassy compound was, as I say, exultant, epiphany, the happiest day of my life. And Vietnam's made a pretty good fist of things ever since. Vietnam is one of the most happening countries in the world. It's a country that millions visit for tourism every year. It's a country that millions buy the products and services from. Vietnam is a success story, and it is a united country today, thanks to the unity that the people north and south showed, whatever their political differences, and there have been some over the years. They were not prepared to allow foreigners to rule their land. Actually, their use of tunnels, many of which I've been in, very difficult for someone my size to crawl very far into them, was their ace card. And right down the entire length of that very long country, they had threads of these tunnels through which they crawled and out of which they emerged to take a heavy toll on the United States occupation army. 58,000 American soldiers were killed in the war in Vietnam, and hundreds of thousands were wounded, either in their body or in their mind. After the war, as many people committed suicide as were actually killed in the battle. And a whole genre of movies which looked back in sadness, not for the Vietnamese, but at what the war had done to the United States. There were many, many heroes. General Giap, the military genius, Uncle Ho Chi Minh, the guiding light, the father of the nation. There were many individual heroes on the battlefield and in the society, but I want to remind you of one of them. Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champion of the world, had been drafted maliciously by his own government to be drafted and sent to the paddy fields of Vietnam. But he said in an interview and in several statements and in court words of such rare beauty and courage that they bear remembering on this historic day. I ain't going to go and fight any Viet Cong, said Muhammad Ali. They never called me nigger. They never lynched me. The Vietnamese people never harmed me. It's the American empire that wants me to go as a black man to fight brown men for the power and influence of white men, and that I will not do. Muhammad Ali was at that time not just the heavyweight champion of the world, but probably the world's most famous man. And his stand with the people of Vietnam and against the American war was important in the big turn in American public opinion that took place beginning around that time. It's, of course, vital to acknowledge that although they had allies in the Soviet Union, in China, the dying was mainly done by the people of Vietnam themselves. Millions were killed. Millions of civilians were killed by the United States in Vietnam. Chemical weapons were tossed down upon them on a daily, almost hourly basis. Agent Orange continued to produce deformed babies in the labor wards of Vietnam for decades after the war, and for all I know, maybe until now. They sought to devastate the country to the point that it would simply surrender. But as Vietnam proved, it's not the size of the dog in the fight that counts. It's the size of the fight in the dog. So, a big salute to the victorious armed forces and people of Vietnam on this 50th anniversary day. The Pope is currently, or will on May the 7th, be the subject of heated discussion inside the Sistine Chapel. If somebody could get the license to televise it, it would certainly beat the audience of the conclave. The wheeling and dealing, sharp elbows and knees, and maybe even blades that are being wielded in the corridors of power in the Vatican is beginning to reach fever pitch. Cardinals are ruling themselves out of the contest. Cardinals are ruling themselves out of the vote, saying they feel unworthy to cast it. Perhaps those cardinals are worried about news that might be emerging about them. Perhaps they're being pressured. Who knows? The man I chose, or tipped rather, right after the death of Pope Francis, Cardinal Parolin of Rome, Pietro Parolin, Peter the Roman, is the bookies' red-hot favourite, and I still believe that he will win. But when video emerged of him schmoozing with Shmuley, the Rabbi Shmuley, the notorious Zionist fanatic from New York, whose daughter runs a kosher sex business and markets a neat brand, I'm told, how would I know, of kosher dildos, has probably done some harm to his potential majority. But Donald Trump, he wants to be the Pope. When asked who he was backing to be the next Pope, he said, I want to be the Pope. And who knows, he might even have meant it. Certainly Senator Lindsey Graham believes that he meant it, because Lindsey Graham immediately went off campaigning, saying that the Trump papacy could be the greatest thing that humanity has ever known. I'm told that he hasn't deleted it and has decided to brush it off as a joke, but I'm also told from Washington that he actually meant it. Well, who could be surprised? We are led by the least of us. We are led by the worst of us on both sides of the Atlantic and throughout the European continent, in Canada and in Australia. The Canadian elections, predictably enough, returned Trudeau's candidate, former governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, bosom buddy of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. He was already the Prime Minister, of course, even though he wasn't a member of Parliament in Canada or anywhere else. even though he had not stood in any election, even though he didn't live in Canada, had no address in Canada. The anointment of the liberal media and the liberal classes in Canada was always likely to see him through. But a word for the pathetic Conservative challenger, who was miles ahead in the polls and at the bookmakers until a couple of weeks ago. But so pitiful was his campaign, he ended up not just losing the premiership, but losing his own parliamentary seat. When I was asked on Sunday night who I wanted to win on Monday, I said I wish that both of these political parties would lose. And unfortunately, that's not yet the case. But the big losers are the Canadian people. They had the choice of one cheek or the other of the same ass. They had the choice between Tweedledee and Tweedledum, and it doesn't much matter who they chose, if indeed they chose him, because there are already a very great number of complaints that the election was not free and fair. I note, incidentally, that Canada now has 22 Sikh MPs, which is twice as many Sikh MPs as there are in India, even though India's population is 1.4 billion more, and their parliament 200 seats more. So if there is a winner in this election, it's our friends, the Sikhs. Now, Labour is facing meltdown tomorrow. Meltdown, or as John McTernan, the former advisor to Tony Blair and one-time advisor to Labour in Australia, and for that matter in Scotland, Mr. John McTernan, a friend of mine, a friend of our show, he says Labour are toast tomorrow. Now, although he's a friend of mine, he was not influenced by me to say that. But he was influenced by Tony Blair. The day before, Mr. Blair had described Keir Starmer's flagship policy of net zero by 2030 or 2050, depending on which moving target they are focused on today, was pie in the sky, could not be achieved, and indeed would be extremely harmful. Duh. We've been saying that from the moment, from the day that the target was set. And I suppose one should be grateful for any convert to the cause, even if that convert is Tony Blair. But John McTernan's statement today that Labour were toast tomorrow, tantamount to high treason in Labour Party terms the day before an election, likely to lead to disciplinary action against him, was influenced by Mr. Blair, I have no doubt, but was more influenced by this. It's going to be such a bad day for Keir Starmer tomorrow that almost certainly a coup, a putsch, will quite quickly be staged against him. And Mr. McTernan definitely has a dog in that fight. His candidate is Mr. Wes Streeting, whose chief parliamentary aide was in court a couple of days ago for indecently exposing himself to a 13-year-old girl, masturbating in front of her and chasing her through the streets of Romford whilst doing it. So Wes Streeting seems to have bounced back from that setback and authorised the statement made by John McTernan today. So here's my prediction. It's going to be so bad for Starmer tomorrow that Streeting will immediately go on manoeuvres, telling his fellow parliamentarians that their seats are doomed. As indeed, cephalogically speaking, they are absolutely doomed if they continue under the leadership of the hapless block of wood, as I called them from the beginning, called Keir Starmer. It is remarkable, and when history comes to be written, it will be a struggle to work out how and why a man who got the biggest parliamentary majority in well over a century has ended up within 10 months as the most despised and hated prime minister in British political memory, and there have been many contenders for that title. Margaret Thatcher, Tony Blair himself, Liz Truss, for God's sake. Starmer is more unpopular than all of them. Keir Starmer is stumbling from one policy disaster poorly presented after another. It's not just net zero. It's not just the pushback on trans issues, which he has clearly begun. Andy Burnham, his right-hand man, the mayor of Manchester, was on LBC on Monday and said that the court's judgment was inexplicable, it was unworkable, and that the government would have to do something, by which he means change the law in favour of trans people's rights. The fact that these rights are at the expense of women, the fact that women are 50% of the population, the fact that women are 50% of the electorate, the fact that every trans right is a right stolen from women does not yet appear to have permeated Starmer's skull. I was going to say thick skull, but he is a King's Counsel, formerly Queen's Counsel, and that is another thing I find completely inexplicable. I cannot imagine who would hire Keir Starmer to represent them in a courtroom. I've never known a man less eloquent. I've never known a man less articulate. I've never known a man with a more nasal, whiny voice. I've never known a man so unattractive as Keir Starmer in every aspect of his physiognomy and of his whole persona, which is dragging Labour to disaster. What do I care? My party's standing in select contests tomorrow. I won't abuse this platform by plugging them, but I will say this. We have two objectives when we stand in elections. Our first goal is to win, but our second goal is to make sure Labour loses. And that objective is going to be met, I predict, in full tomorrow. It is the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned. I discussed with Mr. Jeremy Corbyn on the telephone, and I have told him that I am now going to announce that I, the Workers' Party, and I believe millions in the country, call on Jeremy Corbyn to launch a British version of the new Popular Front. He may or may not want to form a party himself. Others will remain in their own parties. But he must be the leader of a popular front. He's not a perfect leader, Mr. Corbyn. None of us are perfect leaders, but he is the leader. And he does have a seat in Parliament with which to lead the millions of people who today and increasingly over the next months and years will reject the policy, personalities and direction of a Keir Starmer government. So, Mr. Corbyn, I told you I was going to say these words, and I now formally say them. On behalf of the Workers' Party of Britain, we ask you to lead and unite all the forces of the left, of the radical forces in Britain, who reject neoliberalism, who reject endless war, who oppose genocide. Mr. Corbyn, lead us. We will follow you, and I very much hope to hear positive news on that from you by return.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, spoiler alert, I didn't receive any positive reply or any reply at all, and neither has anyone else. I think that sting that we just played has probably outlived its usefulness. Here's the poll for this evening. Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my X, on the YouTube community poll or on the YouTube stream. 15,000 of you have already voted. Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? Yes or no? If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in Britain and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 00442039662625. Now, Ileana Chan is a producer at Empire Watch and co-host of Global Majority for Peace podcast, always well worth watching. Ileana, very welcome to your first but not last, I hope, appearance on the mother of all talk shows. It's very good to see you in person at last. I've been a follower of yours and watched you recently with Li Jingjing and was very impressed. Let's start with Vietnam, if we can. Sometimes relations between China and Vietnam have been rocky, but they're so warm now that there's a substantial contingent of the People's Liberation Army of China celebrating in Vietnam with the Vietnamese people the great historic victory 50 years ago today. The Americans are really not happy about it. Why would that be?
Thank you so much for having me, George. Yes, of course, the Americans are not happy with that. There was a lot to be said about Xi Jinping visiting Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia recently. Of course, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Malaysia are part of the ASEAN. Vietnam is China's third largest trading partner. So it makes sense for Xi Jinping to be visiting those allies in the region. And of course, the US doesn't have anything to offer except for the position of vassal states, which Vietnam is certainly not going to be doing anytime soon. So Trump has indeed pushed them closer together with his tariff shenanigans.
Amazing how they keep doing that. It was formerly an article of faith from the time of Richard Nixon to keep Russia and China at loggerheads. And it should have been, you would have thought, from an imperialist standpoint, an article of faith to keep Vietnam and China as far apart as they could. And in both cases, it has spectacularly failed. The Communist Party of Vietnam, is still firmly in the saddle in Vietnam, and they have made rather a good job, just like the Chinese Communist Party, of running their country and their economy. Their living standards are so much higher than the last time I was in Vietnam, which is maybe 30 years ago, or a little less, but not much. The living standard in Vietnam, the GDP of Vietnam, the salience of Vietnam in the world, in Asia and in the world more generally, is really very high. They've done well, the Vietnamese, since their great victory.
Yes, they have. And communism obviously is a huge part of that. I think what they are very much aware of too, is with the Washington-led anti-communist campaign that wreaked havoc across the world, really, in the 60s and 70s. I mean, that's not something they're going to forget. Millions of people, as you mentioned, died because of that. Unfortunately, the current administration has pretty much the same attitude towards communism. They have said, in maybe in more words than I'm paraphrasing, basically they would rather have death than communism. And certainly that is the way that they're approaching the South China Sea and the escalation towards China. We are obviously looking at that region and wondering what will be the next Ukraine. You hear that a lot in current discourse. And the fact is, we have permanent U.S. troops stationed in Taiwan. We have 9 military bases in the Philippines. We had 2 missiles being deployed from the Philippines in January that reached the southeast coast of China. We have Japan, 55,000 U.S. troops in Japan being upgraded to more war fighting and operational, what do they call it? More operational, I'm not sure what they call it,
Yeah,
but
I know what you
basically
mean.
they were
Yeah.
upgraded, in the end of January. So we're looking at escalations all across that area, and Vietnam certainly doesn't want to be caught in the crossfire. None of us do.
It's a new kind of communism, though, isn't it? Just like in China. The Chinese economic miracle has been achieved by allowing substantial sectors of capitalist activity under, if you like, the guiding hand of a centralized state. That's true of China. It's also true, isn't it, of Vietnam?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, with China, they're famously, officially, a socialist country with Chinese characteristics. I'm sure for Vietnam, it's a socialist country with Vietnamese characteristics. We are looking at, even though, yes, certain purists will accuse Vietnam or China as not being communist enough, but their whole ideology is about adapting to their people's needs, common prosperity for all in the case of China, the targeted poverty alleviation program, which was achieved at the end of 2020 and started in 2013, lifted the last 18 million people from absolute poverty. China is currently in the moderate prosperity for all phase. And by 2050, they want to be a modern socialist country, which includes democracy, it includes prosperity, it includes a beautiful country, which, we can interpret that as to mean environmentally beautiful, environmentally and climately conscious country, and harmonious. That is their ultimate goal. So it is a different type
Well,
of
as a famous
communism.
different type. A famous Chinese leader once said, "It doesn't matter if the cat is black or white. What matters is if it catches mice." And definitely the Chinese and Vietnamese governments have caught a lot of mice. Now, you used a very intriguing phrase there, where will be the next Ukraine? If I was predicting to you where it would be the Philippines. I spent some of the best years of my life campaigning against the huge presence of the US military in the Philippines, particularly the Clark Air Base and the Subic Naval Base. And finally, the Philippines people won that battle. And these bases were closed. Now they've been reopened. And as you say, many more bases are in the Philippines. What could that all be about?
I mean, there's certainly speculation that Bong Bong Marcos Jr. Is definitely a U.S. puppet for financial reasons, for political reasons. We can kind of assume that is so. Certainly his political opponent, Duterte, is facing quite serious charges. We can just speculate, but I think it's quite clear that he is a U.S. puppet and he's being used in a way that's extremely dangerous for the Philippines. It's also isolating for the Philippines. He's talking about dropping out of ASEAN because the rest of Southeast Asia is not backing him up on this. And so, unfortunately, we're looking at just incredibly weak leadership that's self-destructive. So I think you might be right, unfortunately.
Well, I sometimes am. Now, tell me this, Ileana. The tariffs that you mentioned seem to have turned into a bit of a boomerang for President Trump, don't they?
I mean, I think the tariffs can be the tariffs are ridiculous on the face of it already. The whole idea of it, Trump's reasons for putting tariffs on China were never really sound. The main idea being that he would bring back manufacturing in the U.S. Without investing in domestic manufacturing. To put the tariffs first is absolutely ridiculous. But also, I think it is absolutely preposterous to think that China was not prepared for this eventuality. Trump, after all, did put tariffs in his first term on certain machinery and electronics. He put in 25% tariffs for China. So China already knew that was coming. And he keeps talking about tariffs being the most beautiful word in the dictionary, etc. The tariffs obviously are a tax on the American consumer, not on China. China is not actually playing this game that Trump thinks he's playing. China simply is accelerating their original plans, which is to be a genuinely sovereign country. They've been investing in food sovereignty, technological sovereignty, and now, as we can see, as I mentioned earlier, Xi Jinping going to Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam, first of all, also moving soybean imports from the US to Brazil, beef imports as well from the US to Brazil and Australia. I mean, Trump may be thinking that he's doing some sort of tariff trade war, but the truth is China is prepared for it. They've already put down the cards, which they said in March that they are ready to fight till the end for any type of war. So it's a fuss. It's basically a fuss that we will see in the next few months will blow back on the US.
Ileana Chan, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Here's the poll again. Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? Yes or no? 15,000 have voted. Not many people think that she committed suicide. Most people seem to agree with me on Sunday that it all came as a great surprise, not least to Virginia Giuffre. Let me take a quick break and then it's your calls right up to the hour. Stay tuned. On the line is a Rose in Texas. How's that at the beginning of a song? On Californication, which is a song. Rose, welcome to the show.
Fan of the show, transgender fan of the show, and I wanted to briefly address your monologue from last week on Californication, because I almost entirely agree with what you said. Trans women athletes taking medals and records, directing children at nightclubs, and even going to elementary schools themselves, not to mention hormone blockers for children as well. The attack on freedom of speech, not only against conservatives, but anyone who doesn't fall in line with the agenda, rainbow flags on NATO military aircraft, which is certainly doing more to cultivate anti-queer sentiment around the world than there already is. All of that makes me sick. So because I don't believe in incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and pedophilia, I'm basically culturally right-wing by today's standards, even though less than 5 years ago, I'd still be left-wing. So in regards to you and everyone else watching who thinks of me and people like me as the villains right now, you should know that I support the most traditional Muslim, Jewish, Abrahamic believers to be as homophobic and transphobic as they want, because guess what? That's freedom of religion, which is a value we claim to have in the West. Now, my religion, I suppose, is I believe I'm a woman, but guess what? Not everyone has to convert to my religion. Otherwise, we basically have a theocracy, only this theocracy is for the ever-evolving LGBTQIA supercalifragilisticexpialidocious club. So that's all I wanted to get out of my system. Thank you.
Well, Rose, if I could put your call in a glass bottle and ship it around the world, I promise you that I would do so. Crystal clear, beautifully expressed, and I wish you every happiness in life. It is exactly what people who are transgender should be saying. And if they were, they would disappoint the liberal zealots who want to use them as a battering ram against the traditional family values of the rest of us. Beautifully expressed, Rose. I'll never forget it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, believe it or not, there's at least 2 King's Council listening, watching the show this evening, and the best of their messages. I won't name the gentleman concerned, but he is a King's Counsel. I know who he is. George, the Prime Minister was never hired by any client of any ability or intelligence. Human rights lawyers never are. And then he became essentially a civil servant. He is not a real QC KC who competed like me for clients in the world of serious commercial clients. Great show this evening. And the other KC who wrote was saying much the same thing. He doesn't seem to have the highest reputation as a King's Counsel, Keir Starmer, almost as low as his reputation as a Prime Minister. Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? Yes or no? Answers on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Let's go to Canada, where Amy wants to talk about Burkina Faso. Amy, my sincere condolences on inheriting Mark Carney as your Prime Minister. If he's as good as a Prime Minister as he was the Governor of the Bank of England, you are in serious trouble already. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, George. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you to your team. Yes, so anyway, today I wanted to talk about Burkina Faso because there are massive protests to support the leader Ibrahim Traoré worldwide, in Canada, in the U.S., everywhere. People are outraged about the General Michael Langley, if I pronounce his name correctly, in the U.S. A few days ago, he accused Ibrahim Traoré of stealing the gold of Burkina Faso for his own purposes. And I have some questions for this Michael Langley, because I know he's listening. So first of all, where are your proofs? Because when you accuse someone of that crime, you have to get something to base your declaration on. He has nothing. Secondly, so we also Trump with his Musk and his Dodge department, saying that they're going to they're going to cut the corruption, they're going to do something about the corruption in the U.S. So how come you want to do something in Burkina Faso, but in your own country, they are saying that millions and millions of dollars are being stolen from the U.S. people, and he doesn't see that. He sees Burkina Faso in Africa, a poor country. He's worried about Burkina Faso, but in his own country, he doesn't care. And second or third, in his own department, the U.S. military, they can't even give us a credible audit of their own money, because they say that like $1 trillion or $800 million are missing every year. It's been 6 or 7 years that they cannot even tell us what they do with their money. So first of all, he has to look at his own in his own country, because it's a mess in the U.S. Okay, and he's like in worldwide TV saying that, oh, Burkina Faso, the leader is a thief, but I think that the biggest thieves in the world are the U.S. So he has to shut up and let Ibrahim Traoré do his job, because since he's been only 2 years in Burkina Faso, but the changes over there are tremendous. He's building hospitals, he's building infrastructure, he's giving jobs to the youth, he's doing so many things, he's fighting corruption, and all of that fighting terrorism that the U.S. are bringing in Burkina Faso. So all the world is outraged. We know everything. They think that in Africa we don't have the information, but I know what's going on. And be clear that in the Burkina Faso, they know exactly what's going on in the U.S. Even in France, Macron, he's saying, yes, but Ibrahim Traoré is a thief. But Macron is a thief with his old wife. He should be minding his own business. He's a thief. He's stealing French people money. He's the most corrupt government in the history of France. All his ministers have legal issues. Some even the former Minister of Justice, he's supposed to bring justice, but he had to go through the tribunal. So, and my point is that they are accusing people of what they are doing themselves. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, well,
everybody is supporting Burkina Faso.
As the Bible says, tend to the beam in your own eye before seeking to fix the mote in your brother's eye. This issue of Burkina Faso and Captain Ibrahim Traoré has suddenly become one of the biggest political issues in the world, trending regularly on social media. My own interview with our dear friend and guest Nico House on this very subject, literally on this exact subject, is one of our biggest, most viewed clips in all the history of the mother of all talk shows. It's in the millions. Millions of people have watched it on all platforms, including pirates by the dozen going out on TikTok, which is now a pretty regular thing. We're not always able to keep track of them in order to count them and claim the credit for them. But I can say that millions have watched what Nico House said and what I said about Captain Traoré. It's even worse than you said, Amy. He didn't just accuse Captain Ibrahim of stealing Burkina Faso's gold. He accused him of stealing Burkina Faso's gold to pay for his own protection. Well, I wonder why he would need protection. Well, one of the obvious reasons is that both France and the United States are quite clearly committed to killing him. What is it about Captain Traoré that they want to kill? Well, in addition to the great strides forward that you have adumbrated, this very week, the Burkina Faso government abolished all education fees. It is now free to go to nursery, primary, secondary, and university in Burkina Faso. What's not to love about that? Traoré has nationalized the building of the country's roads when he discovered that the private French companies that were hitherto building the roads were charging up to 100 times more for the building of those roads than the government of Burkina Faso itself can do. And so he's brought it in-house. There's now a public works department in Burkina Faso, in Ouagadougou, which will henceforth pave and lay roads across the whole country. Speaking of gold, he's nationalized the gold industry, which had enriched generation after generation of French gold thieves who were the previous owners of the mines, including Canadian French gold thieves. The private interests who hitherto owned the gold are naturally rather sore that Burkina Faso now owns the gold. And what use that gold will be put to is already being decided in decisions like the ones you have highlighted and that I am now highlighting. And anyway, there's no need for gold to pay for security because President Putin has already sent Russian special forces to protect the life of Captain Ibrahim Traoré. I'll be in Moscow, God willing, for the great Victory Day celebrations on the 9th of this month. And guess who'll also be there? You've got it, Captain, my Captain, Ibrahim Traoré. I definitely hope to interview him. Now you can leave comments on the YouTube by scanning the QR code now. Leave a comment. If it's good, I'll read it out. Roger Asai says, waiting for the people of the Philippines to start using a non-empire imposed name for their land, the land of King Philip II, doesn't really fit it anymore, does it? Very good point, Roger. Neil Curry says, an odd irony that the historically skewed Hollywood movies depicting their war on Vietnam has contributed to the tourism there today. Very good point. Pen Dog says Vietnam is very proud of their new metro. Beautiful stuff. And Ernest Mostly says Vietnam's barefoot army kicked America's ass. And Phil Dobson says, I will never forget the photo of the girl running as the napalm burned. Let's go to our good friend Terence in England, in Corby, on Virginia, Giuffre, and other matters. Go ahead, Tel.
The Galway, and I was moved with just the title of your poll, and for you as that young girl and a lot of other young girls and young boys, their souls have been killed from the moment of inception with the dirty mollusks. And for those people in the legal system that protect them, and you go, allegedly, and lots around the world, hang your head in shame, because we know what you were up to. And that girl was killed a long time ago. And however she died, she on her soul, women of heaven, because killed as a child. And let's not forget his royal vileness and all the other people. That's my first point. The second point is a question to you, Mr. Galloway.
A very good point.
So much.
Yes.
My second point is a question to you. Any candidates you running for council, I don't think local council really matters. It's a big prize you need. About 8 of your MPs at the next election. So how does that pan out with your party? And I know the man you are. You give free rein to people who have an aptitude for doing these things. How are you looking at this local election, which I think doesn't matter, but it's going to establish your party, or the Workers' Party, I should say, under the lines of Connolly, who was the best man I've ever read in my life. Lenin quoted Connolly. Connolly never quoted Lenin. So at that point, I'd like you to dwell on with your own sort of trajectory.
Well, thank you for that call and for your kind words, obviously. These are county council elections tomorrow, and the counties are not actually really where we are strong. So we're not standing in many county council seats. I think 4, 3 county council seats and 1 council by-election in my own town of Rochdale. And that election is going to be very, very interesting indeed. We only got a couple of hundred votes there 12 months ago. You wait and see how many votes we get there tomorrow. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but we are not just not going away in Rochdale, we are very definitely back. Labour will come 3rd in that by-election, I predict. We're also standing in the parliamentary by-election in Runcorn, where the latest poll shows us costing Labour the seat. And as I said right at the beginning, our task is, first of all, to fight to win, but if we can't win, then to make sure Labour loses. And in the latest poll in Runcorn, that is precisely what we have achieved. That's our historic patriotic mission, to destroy the fake Labour Party, a wolf in sheep's clothing, and a traitor to the working people of Britain. And a traitor is always worse than an enemy. An enemy is an honest foe standing in front of you. A traitor is standing beside you, or even right behind you. The big push for us is next May. May the 1st, 2026 will be our biggest electoral exercise yet. We intend to stand 1,000 candidates up and down the land in the local council elections next May. And that will very definitely put us very firmly, and I hope permanently, on the political map of England. Thank you, Terence, in Corby. Tonight's top donors, a really big thanks to tonight's top donors who visited our website, moats.tv. Charles E. Cartwright, Pierre Baudon, Patrick McMahon, Stephen Garno, and the MOATS Mega Donor of the Week award goes to Ernesto Torres Almodovar. Well, a big thanks to each and every one of you, the big donors, and equally a big thanks to those who are not able to make big donations but are making regular small donations. £1, $1, €1 from everybody. That's what we need in order to keep 2 shows a week going. So please go to the website moats.tv and give your dues. Rana is also in Canada, in Nova Scotia. She was removed from the NDP in Canada for Palestine support. Wow! Rana, tell us more.
Oh, hello, George. Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for the amazing job you do regularly informing and raising awareness, and I know you're also a very passionate advocate for Palestine, so thank you for that. Yes, I am actually currently a Green Party of Canada candidate, and I ran in this recent federal election, but allow me to fill you in how I got there. I originally was a candidate for NDP. I won a hard-won nomination, contested nomination for Dartmouth Cole Harbour, which is a very winnable riding for the NDP. It's been 50% usually NDP and Liberals. And within 1 month, over a vetted tweet, they removed me as a candidate, saying my tweet for Palestine, 2 words, were problematic. I believe they just used it as an excuse. And, of course, the lobbyists, they come after you hardcore. And 6 months later, I won the Nova Scotia Human Rights Award, and the Zionist lobbyists and the rabbis wrote against me. And, of course, CJAB and IBRIT, all those lobbyists come after you. And in a private meeting with the Human Rights Commission, they had my Human Rights Award rescinded as well within 10 days. I received it on December the 10th, and on the 20th, I got a call that was rescinded. So they come after me hardcore every time they see that my voice is being amplified. They also tried to take away my nomination for the Green Party when I ran in the past, again, citing that my tweets, because I was mindful of my language after that, but I refused to stop tweeting about Palestine. So I've been under their, in their line of sight for quite some time, and constantly have to watch myself when I put myself out there. But I believe in standing up for human rights. I believe in a better Canada, and I really wanted to discuss what happened in this federal election, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I watched your show a couple of days ago, and what you said about Mark Carney, it is absolutely unbelievable what's happening. When Trudeau was here, people were absolutely unhappy, and Pierre Poilievre was in the lead. The problem that we have as Canadians is, unfortunately, we're brainwashed into voting the lesser of 2 evils, or a strategic voting. And this brainwashing mentality has kept these parties in power for the past 150 years. The NDP was part of the government, helped form it, and had the ability to bring a lot of changes, including electoral reform, which unfortunately they didn't do anything that was very concrete. And the fact that they lost so many seats goes to show you that the confidence that they have also lost within their voter base, because of course their continuous bowing down to Zionist lobbyists and getting rid of candidates, whether it's at the provincial level, federal level, or even teammates who are working for them. I really feel we need a political revolution. We are long overdue. And when I was running for the Greens, I was under no delusion that I was going to win. But as a candidate, your voice is amplified, and it was, to me, was allowing me to bring to the forefront the crisis that we're facing in affordability and standard of living, not just here in my riding, but all over Canada. Very importantly, the human rights violation and the genocide that's happening in Palestine. Even to this day, Mr. Carney has refused to acknowledge that it is a genocide. And, of course, the final thing was, as I said, a political revolution. And I was able to, at least I'm hoping, to sow the seeds of that rebellion. And I even used the hashtag Be the Rebellion, because only once every 4 years the average person can be publicly accounted. They can have their voices heard by showing where their votes are going. sadly, because of Pierre Poilievre's threatening against, his growing fascism of deporting, same thing that Donald Trump is doing, threatening to deport Palestinian peaceful rally goers if they're not citizen, of deporting them back. Also, cutting funding to UNRWA, and a lot of very unfriendly policies towards minorities created the fear factor, and many who would not have voted for him. Would not have voted for Liberals, then ended up giving the Liberals...
Well, look, I understand that, Rana, but voting for the so-called lesser of two evils has two problems associated with it. First of all, you have to be able to discern which is the lesser of two evils. And in Monday's election in Canada, I simply would not have been able to do that. Both Carney and Poilievre are just the worst, the pits, the worst Canadians were running to be Prime Minister. Not so much Tweedledee and Tweedledum, but two cheeks of the same backside. So I congratulate you on your fortitude, your steadfastness, and in still standing tall, talking, identifying yourself, putting yourself out there on behalf of what's right. And surely you will be rewarded, if not in this life, then definitely in the next. But it is astounding that the tearing apart of little children, the cutting in half of little children, the regular displaying of the innards, the insides of little children in Gaza, garners you only a handshake and a photo opportunity and a place in the European Football Championships for Israel. But standing up against, tweeting against the cutting of children in half, the beheading of babies, the mass murder of mothers and fathers, grandparents, the destruction of hovels and rubble, the burning down of tents and the people in them. If you tweet against that, or in the case of kneecap, if you rap about that, you'll be cancelled, deselected, deplatformed, shadow banned, choked, strangled, sacked, even jailed. Kneecap are being cancelled in every venue around the Western world for daring to highlight a genocide which is a crime against humanity and which it is everyone's legal duty to stand up against. Talk about shooting the messenger. They're kneecapping the messengers all over the Western world. It is beyond comprehension, and you are just the latest example of it. Now let me talk about our podcast. We are again in the top 100 in India, Australia, the UK, France, and Russia this week. Oh, looking forward to being recognized in the street by our podcast viewers in Russia. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen now. And you can listen to the weekly podcast via the aforementioned moats.tv website. Once you've listened, please don't forget to leave a positive review and rate it too. It helps us, believe me, to grow the podcast. Last call before the break, Yasser in Quebec. 3 Canadian calls in a row. Yasser, what would you like to say?
Mr. Galloway, first I wish to thank you profusely for covering Canadian elections and for providing your insightful, incisive commentary on this topic. Unfortunately, Canada does not get its due share of headlines across the world. I'm really glad that you're covering this. And I wanted to request your commentary on how you foresee Canada's now a very testy business relationship with the U.S., considering that almost $435 billion are exported to U.S. It accounts for almost 75% of Canada's exports. And under the leadership of Justin Trudeau, Canada managed to spoil its relationship with China, with Russia, with India. So I'm not sure what options exist now for the newly anointed Prime Minister, Mark Carney, to look for alternative markets to hedge their bets. And how do you foresee the impact on Canada's economy post the election of Mark Carney, or selection of Mark Carney, I should say? Thank you.
Well, it's a very smart call, a very smart question. Canada has few options. Maybe the 22 Sikh MPs will help Canada grow its business in India, but for the most part, this is why I've said from the Trump beginning 100 days ago, exactly this day, that all I can really do is laugh, because Canada has been such a willing slave to the United States, and yet the United States is now openly threatening to absorb it, to take it, if necessary, by force. That's what Donald Trump said. I'm not ruling out force, he said, in relation to the slave called Canada and in relation to the slave called Denmark. Being a slave to the United States, as the South Vietnamese regime found out 50 years ago, as the Afghan regime, which stole away like a thief in the night when the Taliban came back to power, and many, many others could testify, if you have no respect for yourself, why would anybody else respect you? And Canada is not respected by the United States because it has been a slave, a willing, voluntary slave of the United States. And they have burned their bridges with China. They have burned their bridges with Russia. They have burned their bridges now with Donald Trump's USA. And I don't know what's going to happen to you. I don't want to upset our audience in Canada, of whom we clearly have many. The first three calls have all been from Canada. But I don't really care what happens to Canada. I'm sorry, I know there are a lot of good people there, but we have a saying, don't we? You made your own bed, so you'll have to lie in it. And I think that that's what faces the Canadian people, a fitful, restless sleep, now that the bed they made, they have to sleep in. Let me give you the poll update so far. Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? Yes or no? The vast majority say no. 16,000 people have voted. Get your vote in the next 40 minutes and have it counted. So, a quick break, then it is the best journalist in Europe, Kit Klarenberg, coming up right after this break. Stay tuned. Let's hear from Mehdi. Go ahead, sir.
Hello, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. This is such an honor, because one thing I want to tell you is in 2003, I thought that you, I'll say it, I thought you were a prattling liberal idiot. 20 years later, I'm here honored to speak to you, to say live on air, I'm sorry, I should have listened to you back then. You're bringing the truth to what's going on out there. And one of the things is U.S. policy, whatever it is now, is our government. The problem is that it's run by people with absolutely no honor. They have no shame in what they will do to accomplish what they want. And I really think part of what's going on, that's driving what's going on in Ukraine, is that it's the possibility of all the corruption that it will uncover that has happened there with the influence of our country and NATO since 2014.
Yeah, you spoke extremely powerfully and very graciously, and I'm grateful for it. But you put your finger on, I think, something that's been in the back of my mind for a while. I grew up in a time, indeed I sat in Parliament for almost 30 years, during a time when there were certain standards. There were double standards, of course, and there was a great deal of hypocrisy. But the ruling elite had standards that they tried to keep up. Nowadays, that facade has been torn asunder. Now they're not even pretending to be honorable gentlemen and ladies. Now they're no longer pretending that their institutions, their great departments and ministries are in anything to do with contemporary politics other than an arm of the ruling party. My last word, Mehdi, I ain't no liberal, bruv. I wasn't back in 2003, and I ain't any more liberal today.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide, or was it all a big surprise, not least to her? Yes or no? Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? Get your votes in the next 40 minutes. The very best of our journalists is having to work overseas. And on returning to this country, Kit Klarenberg, the best of British journalists, was apprehended by the police for terrorism, as happened to the Honourable Craig Murray, happened to Richard Medhurst, happened to Kit Klarenberg. But when you see the sheer power of his pen, you can see why it strikes terror in the hearts of the powerful and the establishment forces in Britain. I'm very glad to say he joins us now. He is an investigative journalist at the Grey Zone, the best news site anywhere in the world. Kit, thanks for joining us. Before getting on to some of the incredible material you've been producing of late, indeed for a long time, but of late I think you have reached a real purple patch. Let me take your view as it were, an involuntary expat. Keir Starmer's facing a wipeout tomorrow, just 10 months after a landslide parliamentary majority. Where did it all go wrong, do you think?
Well, I mean, I like to make the gag a farewell to Starmer of late, because I think that his goose is cooked. He is on his last legs. I don't think that he has very much left longer in power, but of course he's not in power. He's just doing whatever MI5 and MI6 and his controllers in the Ministry of Defence tell him to do. Now, as I drew attention to on Twitter, there was a little noticed report in the Times, I believe it was 4 or 5 days ago, which announced that the UK was scrapping any and all plans to send troops to Ukraine. And it had this absolutely golden excerpt in it, in which it claimed that the UK has always been opposed to deploying soldiers to Ukraine. It was France that wanted a more muscular approach. This is after months and months of bellicose, dangerous statements and commitments and pledges by Starmer that he would support Ukraine for as long as it takes, to the tune of billions per year, while pensioners are dying of cold because they can't afford their energy bills. He openly and repeatedly stated that he would commit not peacekeeping forces but regular British soldiers to fight alongside Ukraine. This was confirmed by John Healey all of a week ago, I believe. He spoke of deploying British jets to police the skies over Ukraine. And now, apparently none of this happened, and it was all the French's idea in the first place anyway. To have put himself at such a high level and to have effectively checkmated himself, the only way out of that is down. We have seen also in recent weeks the bizarre efforts to boost and amplify Wes Streeting as somehow a way of appealing to working class voters. Wes Streeting being a unctuous, charmless scumbag funded by the private health industry, who is the health secretary, came within a few hundred votes of losing his seat to a pro-Palestinian independent candidate with zero money, institutional backing, or media support at the last election. If that's the best they can do, Labour are in trouble. But I might round out this section by noting, I mean, you referred to the lesser of two evils in Canada's election. In the UK, we have the evil of multiple lessers. Every single British political party remains, despite this recent development that actually, after all, there shall be no British troops in Ukraine, they remain committed to keeping this proxy war grinding on interminably at unsustainable human, material and financial cost. Labour, the Conservatives, the Lib Dems, the Greens, they are all pro-war, they are all pro-NATO. There is no choice.
And Reform, don't forget them. Nigel Farage, once accused of taking the Kremlin shilling. He's right in line. He's standing shoulder to shoulder with Keir Starmer. And ooh la la, was the French that done it. Such mendacity is difficult to fathom. We all saw Keir Starmer say, we saw his lips move. We saw John Healey's lips move as they pledged thousands of British soldiers as a reassurance force in Ukraine, and now they're asking us to believe they never wanted that in the first place. I've never known a British government that not just lies so much, Kit, but is caught lying so much.
Yes, well, I mean, I think that the Labour have so far relied on a liberal commentariat which is willing to not only make excuses for their lies, but also actually justify it as legitimate statecraft and political theatre. I mean, we've got to bear in mind that Starmer was elected on a clear platform of maintaining all of Corbyn's very modest social democratic policies, and made a series of 5 pledges, and was briefing mainstream journalists during his leadership campaign. Were being briefed on the fact that actually we're not going to follow any of this, and we're just lying in order to get into power and then start purging the party of any and all progressive dissident elements, which is exactly what's come to pass in the most brutal, bloody, callous way imaginable. Although I did see that Momentum recently said, well, if you're unhappy with the direction of the Labour Party and you're a socialist, you should rejoin and attempt to push them back in the right direction, because that's worked so well on every occasion it's been tried. You know, I mean, this is, and it's quite remarkable. You look at polls. This is the most unpopular government in history, led by the least trusted, most unpopular Prime Minister in history, which replaced the previously least popular and trusted Prime Minister and government in British history. It's really quite extraordinary. There is a huge upsurge of demand from average citizens for change in the UK, and they're being offered zero solutions or alternatives by anyone, including, I might add, mainstream left-wing figures, if you can even call them that, like, say, Owen Jones, or norovirus media, as I like to call them. That 10 years ago, they would be brought onto the BBC to be laughed at and mocked as these Marxist lunatics with nice-sounding ideas, but, we can't afford it, and they're not realistic, and blah, blah, blah. That was their purpose. Fast forward to today, and they are not saying anything. They're not proposing anything. And then meanwhile, I saw this morning, there was a survey of major countries in the world released, which showed the UK was amongst the lowest ranked countries internationally for human flourishing in well-being. I wonder why that is. Could it be 15 years of failed, destructive, suicidal austerity policies? I don't know.
I can hear Iberia calling me from this septic isle as you speak. It's definitely a very unhappy place, for sure. and with not much immediate prospect. I mean, Wes Streeting's nobody's idea of someone who's going to turn things around, apart from Mr. McTernan, which is why he said Labour is toast, because he's very close to Wes Streeting, and this is a clear sign that Wes Streeting is about to make a push. But not one, but two of your recent pieces have been monumental pieces of work, and I take my hat off to you for them. Let me deal with the first one and finish with the second. You reveal that the catastrophe of the Ukrainian army's invasion of Kursk in Russia, which has led perhaps to 75,000 Ukrainian casualties, was not just a British idea, but was actually effectively run by the British military and intelligence apparatus. Give us the short version of that, will you?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the short version is, as many people may remember, in August 2024, the Ukrainians sprang a surprise counter-invasion of Kursk. Now, my immediate gut reaction, based on my prior reporting on Britain's leading role in this nightmarish proxy conflict, was this was probably an insane idea cooked up by the British, and this was subsequently confirmed by mainstream reporting in the Times of London. The British planned this, they oversaw it, they provided the bulk of the equipment, but moreover, they sought to explicitly and openly advertise their involvement in this in order to try and encourage other Western proxy war sponsors, of course the US being foremost amongst them, into becoming formal belligerents in the conflict, which is to say all-out hot war between NATO and Russia. The US didn't quite take the bait. Neither did Germany, whose Leopard tanks were smashed to smithereens almost universally during this god-awful military operation in Kursk, which was always going to be complete suicide. Now, I might add as well that, yes, this counter-invasion, quote-unquote, has now come to a total end. The area that has been completely liberated of any and all Ukrainian soldiers, countless taken prisoner, tens of thousands injured or killed, and a vast amounts of expensive, difficult, if not impossible to replace Western military vehicles and armor and artillery left for the Russians to pick at. It has been a disaster on every conceivable front, on top of attempting to encourage deeper, more open involvement by Western powers in this quagmire. It was also hoped it would give Ukraine a bargaining chip in negotiations. As Donald Trump has said, the Ukrainians have no cards now. You know, they're all they can do is, and I saw just before we went live that a Ukrainian envoy has flown into Washington to sign peace deals, but there are doubts that that's even going to happen because they want to discuss the terms, which the Americans are not willing to do. You know, this was a total waste of life and money and energy and time and much more besides. And I might add that, yes, I mean, you as I have consistently reported and has been confirmed in the mainstream media, if there is a major military catastrophe in which Ukraine has been engaged, you can bet that in 99%, if not 100% of cases, it would be the British masterminding the catastrophe. I reported a few weeks ago, based on a New York Times expose on the extent of US support for the war in Ukraine, that the British took a lead role in encouraging Kiev to push ahead with its 2023 counteroffensive, narrative, which was, much vaunted, and we were told was going to change military history. In the event, again, losses may have exceeded 100,000 people to regain 0.25% of the territory lost to Russia in the initial waves of the invasion. The New York Times noted the British were key to pushing the Ukrainians to go ahead with this, even though they said they weren't ready to do it, and trying to allay US concerns about this going ahead. That my reporting was then confirmed by the Times of London in a very bizarre piece, which seemed to try and talk up Britain's role in this as somehow heroic and Churchillian, when it was, again, one of the biggest military catastrophes in modern history, like Gallipoli 2.0.
Exactly, another Churchill catastrophe. Why is that, Kit? A lot of people think it's because the British hate communism, as if Russia was still a communist country. But it long predates Bolshevism, predates Putin, Bolshevism. It goes way back. What is this ancient and peculiar hatred of the British for the Russians?
Well, Russia is a country which has never been save for the god awful 90s, the grotesque excesses of the 90s. It's a country that has never been, the West has, particularly Britain, has never been able to subjugate. It has always been viewed by Britain as a barrier to Anglo and subsequently Anglo-American expansion into numerous areas of the world. Now, you've got to bear in mind, even when Russia was effectively led by members of the British royal family in the form of the Romanovs, they were still a wrecker in international affairs from the perspective of London. They supported the independence fighters in the American War of Independence against the British. They supported the North versus the South in the American Civil War. America, in return, was on Russia's side during the Crimean War. And this is despite, yes, them being ultimately led by members of the same family. You have the Russian Revolution. Well, they end up killing the Romanovs and therefore killing some of the British ruling elite's own. That's never forgivable. Now, you've got to bear in mind, in 1917, and this is something I've written about for my website, it has the title "The Anglo-French Plot to Dismember Russia." Okay, in 1917, after after the Bolsheviks signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany, France and Britain, along with a large number of other countries, including Japan and the US, they invaded the burgeoning Soviet Union. And it was explicitly in the manner of Godfather 2, where they carve up the cake of Cuba between the different mafia dons. It was about subjugating and Russia, tearing it up into easily exploitable chunks, due to its vast untapped resources. The French got the coal, the British got the timber. The entire map of Russia was divided in that manner. The Russians managed to successfully fight back that invasion, and ever since, yes, with the exception of the 1990s, the West has not been able to bring them to heel. In my neck of the woods, the adopted neck of the woods, the Balkans, the British are very, very, very active. Cities like Belgrade and Sarajevo are crawling with MI6 operatives up to no good and causing trouble. And and then meanwhile, British think tanks talk about Russian aggression and Russian meddling in the Balkans. While there are British quote-unquote peacekeepers openly walking in public in Bosnia and Kosovo and other places with their weapons drawn. If that's not an invasion and occupation, I don't know. But allegedly they're there to to guard against the risk of Russian aggression. Who's the aggressor here? It's really quite extraordinary, and I think as well. This is that enduring desire to get their hands on Russia's resources. It is writ large in the leaked documents that I've reported on for Grey Zone related to the operations of Project Alchemy, which is this Ministry of Defense created secret cell of military veterans and intelligence operatives who came up with all sorts of wild ideas for keeping Ukraine fighting at all costs. That's a verbatim quote. They explicitly talk about wanting to get their hands on Russia's oil and gas reserves, which are, the world's largest, Russia's minerals, that sort of thing. That mindset has gone nowhere. And it has led us to where we are now, with NATO disarmed, Ukraine effectively lacking a male population. Yes, the all along the enduring risk of this escalating into World War III.
Well, let's come up to date. Your latest piece, again, a piece of brilliant reporting. You, as it were, draw together all these disparate elements. The British, unable, unwilling, now claiming they never wanted to field forces in Ukraine. The French, according to Starmer, as you say, the real muscular belligerents, they can't. Nobody can. Nobody in Europe has the men or the money, by jingo, to field any kind of army against Russia without the US cavalry, as you put it. And the US cavalry isn't going to show up, is it?
No. Well, this is what caught my eye was that Politico published this very lengthy piece, which was, Politico is worth reading because it's elites talking with elites, in the same way that the Financial Times is, the best of a bad bunch, which is not necessarily saying very much. But Politico published this article on how the US cavalry isn't coming, and its main thrust is pushing this now familiar narrative that, because of Donald Trump, the transatlantic alliance is under threat and Europe cannot rely on the US for defense anymore. This is, exclusively and explicitly due to Trump being in the White House. And it went on to document in pretty forensic detail the extent to which all of Europe's defense planning, infrastructure, intelligence capabilities, and everything under the sun necessary for warfighting has been built exclusively on the assumption of the Americans coming to the rescue. I thought that this was a good opportunity to note that, the US has explicitly sought to enfeeble and effectively disarm the Europeans. Ever since the end of World War II, but particularly following the collapse of communism in the late 80s and the early 1990s, there was at that time a push by French and German leaders and the burgeoning European Union. It was the European Community at the time, but it was to become the European Union, that there were high-level discussions and decisions made about integrating defense, security, and foreign policy across Europe, with the explicit purpose of reducing US influence over the continent. This was codified in the highly controversial but historic Maastricht Treaty in 1992, and France and Germany also created a parallel force to NATO called Eurocorps. The US was extremely unhappy about this, publicly and privately threatened countries not to join, threatened France and Germany not to push ahead with this. There are some, they're largely forgotten now, but there are some amazingly illuminating and revealing comments made by assorted US and NATO officials about NATO's true role. In my piece, I quote Alexander Haig, who was the former NATO Supreme Commander. And he noted in 2002 that the US's military presence in Germany, which is drowning under the weight of US military installations and has tens of thousands of soldiers there at any one time, he openly admitted this is a bona fide of our economic success. It keeps European markets open to us. If we weren't there, those markets will probably be more difficult to access. So NATO is a means of ensuring that European countries remain open to US economic domination, both on a consumer level, but also via compelling NATO members to buy expensive military equipment, which often doesn't work or doesn't work very well, but also ensuring that no major rivals or economic competitors emerge globally. So, I mean, the Politico signed off by saying that, by investing heavily in a war strategy built on US support that may never materialize, Europe risks preparing for the wrong conflict. My argument would be, well, Europe has always been preparing for the wrong conflict. The threat has never come from the East. It has been necessary to create this chimera of a threat from, first the Soviet Union, then Russia, to justify US economic rape and pillage of Europe over many decades. They now seem to have achieved that to the extent that they feel they can step away from any military commitment in Europe by token of the anti-Russian sanctions, which have destroyed European economies and made them even more dependent on the US than before.
Extraordinary. Kit Klarenberg, investigative journalist at The Grey Zone. An amazing tour de force. Thank you for that brilliant interview. Let me take a quick break, then it's your calls all the way up to Gayatri's social media news roundup. Stay tuned. Let me say that you can listen to the audio-only version of MOATS on our MOATS podcast, and the numbers on that are going through the roof. Just search MOATS with George Galloway on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. In recent weeks, it's been the #1 political podcast in Benin, Jordan, the Gambia, Qatar, Jamaica, Ghana, Iceland, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, and the Philippines. #1 political podcast in all those countries. Truly, truly phenomenal. Do you know that BBC News has lost 40% of its audience in the last 2 years? It's official. And of course, that is the sensible thing to do. But to get people to tune in and change course and listen to a radically different point of view is even more difficult. But it's happening. And the numbers that we are racking up are now in their millions.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Right, let's go down under to Sydney, where Hanan wants to talk about Virginia Giuffre. Go ahead, Hanan.
Good morning, George. So we have morning here in Sydney, so good morning.
Yes, of course.
For everyone. Good evening to whoever in the rest of the world. Just for Virginia, I really don't think she suicide. Because she herself, she announced, she said, in case if I've been found dead, I never suicide. Like for her, that's against her belief to suicide. So my opinion that she's been killed. But the question is that I don't know the answer for it, and I hope, George, you can answer me. Why she's been killed when her case has been closed? Like she's with Prince Andrew, it's been settled. The case has been settled, and everything finished.
Well, they made an out-of-court settlement, and it turns out that the British taxpayer funded all of it because Andrew's mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, gave him £12 million sterling to pay to settle the case. £12 million, which didn't come out of his pocket. It came out of our pocket. Because, of course, all of the Queen and King's wealth is our wealth. We gave it to them, either willingly or they took it by force in generations gone by. So, as I understand it, that £12 million has been paid and will therefore be in Virginia Giuffre's estate, or what's left of it. But if anyone has any other information, additional information as to whether all of it perhaps has not been paid because perhaps payments were staged, were perhaps conditional on silence from Virginia Giuffre, that would make me look at the suicide murder conundrum in a slightly different way. Look, it is possible that it was suicide. Many people were, including me, were drawing on a statement that she made that she would never commit suicide. But that turned out to be from 2019. And that may very well have been her state of mind then. It doesn't mean that in 2025 she would never commit suicide. The injuries that she sustained in the altercation with a bus looked more like the injuries sustained in a beating to me. But I'm only going by photographs. I didn't examine her and can't say that for sure. I think it's fair to say that this young, tragic woman has had a very, very, very hard life, right from her childhood. Right up until meeting Epstein at the age of 13, right up until meeting Prince Andrew at the age of 16. This girl was used and abused by men and later rich and powerful men. And that must have caused her a great deal of physical as well as psychological damage. So I can't say for sure that she did not commit suicide, although the vast majority of voters in our poll do not believe that it was suicide. I think the jury's out, as indeed it is, on the earlier suicide of Jeffrey Epstein. So if you want to call, US and Canada +1 844 944 3344, Britain and Ireland 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 44203 966 2625. A big shout out now to tonight's top donors who've been on to the MOATS.tv website since we came on air. Luke Derbyshire, Jamie Moody, Ambreen Khalil, and a massive thank you to Mikael Nystrom and Paul Timperley, who are tonight's biggest donors. A big thanks to all of you, and a big thanks to all who have not yet but are going to give right after this show. Let's go to Los Angeles, where Nick is on the line about the Pope. Go ahead, Nick.
Hey, George. Big question coming up for the conclave next week, with obviously the replacement of Pope Francis. My question really is around the influence of the American Catholic Church within that group. You know, you got the likes of Timothy Dolan out of New York, a very right-wing, Trump-leaning type of Catholic. My experience here as a Catholic from Irish-Italian stock from the East End of London, some of the worst, the most bigoted Catholics I've ever experienced are the Irish-American community in America. So their attachment to their faith and then the message of the gospel seems to be very confused. They're not even aware that their own government for many years, with all its meddling in South America and Central America, was at the forefront and connected to the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero, for 6 Jesuit priests and Catholic laywomen and nuns in El Salvador at a similar time. Guns paid for, people trained by the American government. So next week in Rome, what do you think? I mean, it's a big decision for Rome, and who will be Francis' successor, and what will be the outcome for the Catholic Church globally? What do you think could happen, would happen, or should happen? I'd be interested in your thoughts.
What a clever erudite call. That's why we say we are the Open University of the airwaves. Thank you, Nick, in Los Angeles. Yes, the American Catholic Church, which was regularly giving Joe Biden Holy Communion, even though he was in rampant, brazen, all guns blazing defiance of multiple key parts of Catholic Church doctrine, from abortion to trans and to many other things. Joe Biden, like Tony Blair here in this island, are the most unlikely Roman Catholics. If to be a Roman Catholic is to follow church doctrine, is to follow the gospel, is to try to walk in the footsteps of Christ. But we both know, Nick, that that isn't the purpose of the hierarchy in the church in the United States, for all the reasons that you have given, and many, many more could have been adduced in the long dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines, the atrocities carried out with the blessing of the Catholic Church in the Philippines against the struggling people of the Philippines, trying to overthrow their dictator, the people of Vietnam, led by, for a time until the United States murdered them, the Diem brothers, prominent Roman Catholics in Vietnam. Most of these individuals, powerful individuals, are Catholic in name only. They're certainly not acting in the manner of Jesus of Nazareth. As to what, by the way, it wasn't just El Salvador. I myself have seen the results of these very same atrocities, including against church women and men, in the laity and in the clergy in Nicaragua during the dirty war there, the Contra War. The American government, with the blessing of cardinals like Dolan, not him, he wasn't there, but like Dolan, was going on throughout Latin America for decades. So I don't take Dolan very seriously, and I don't think the conclave will. I think he has zero chance of being elected. My prediction is, and of the available candidates, given that Donald Trump can't be the Pope because he's not a Catholic, and given that I'm unlikely to be nominated, though I'm entitled to run, the likely outcome is the one that I think is the best outcome, or the least worst outcome. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, who is the Secretary of State at the Vatican and whom I have met and was very impressed by, Parolin would be a continuation of Francis's papacy. And given that I think that Francis was the best pope since Constantine, you can imagine I'll settle for a continuation of his papacy, a kind of Francis 2.0. Nick, thanks for the opportunity to say that. Pebbles McCann says, long live Ibrahim Traore. He's a brilliant leader and a brilliant reformist. He's ridding his country of foreign exploitation from France and the US. And Moonside Dance says, why do you zero in on a Hundutva saying BS about Pakistan, but a caller telling BS about a Chinese cannibal in Canada gets played along? I don't know what you're talking about, actually. Moonside, come back and let me know. Better still phone up. I genuinely don't know what you're talking about. Jack Klugman says, never forget, this is Israeli joie de vivre. They mock the headless kids. They almost went mad for a few weeks of ceasefire, watching smiling families in Gaza eating. Absolute monsters. Well, Jack, I commend to you the Louis Theroux documentary, which is available on BBC iPlayer, but for those outside the country, it's also quite widely available now on X. I watched it on X. His documentary on the West Bank settlers. The more people see it, the better, put it that way. Anthony Wedgwood, another great name, says people are trying to get kneecap banned from Glastonbury this year. What a joke. Idols did a good job last year of speaking out during their set, so I imagine they won't be allowed back again. Sorry, Anthony, that went right over my head. Christina Hines says, disappointing to hear Galloway indicate he's not going to abuse the MOATS platform by using MOATS to promote the Workers' Party. That's not in the best interests of the British people. What can I say? Let me have a quick break, and then let me give you a promo of Have It Out with Galloway. Watch this. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Be on the studio wall. Participate in the debate about the greatest issues of our time. This is the place where we tackle the world's biggest problems and offer some of the world's best answers. You can have your say. Write to me at our website at haveitoutwithgalloway.com and join me here in the studio audience.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, Raymond writes to me that Donald Trump would be the first Orangeman to be Pope and head of the Roman Catholic Church. Very droll. Perhaps you need to have experienced sectarianism here on this septic isle, and indeed its isle just off its coast, to fully grasp that. Now, no to NATO. I've got a meeting tomorrow. Brilliant speakers. Next stop, Dan Kovalik and Patrick Henningsen. There is very good graphics, very, very good speakers. Next stop, Dan Kovalik and Patrick Henningsen. Tomorrow night at 9 p.m. London time on my YouTube channel. It's called Deal or No Deal. I suppose by then we might actually know if it's deal or no deal. Let's take a quick call from Ola in Poland on Africa and Traore. We are the Global University of the Airwaves after all. Ola, what would you like to say?
Hello, George. Longest time. I've been following behind the scene, actually.
Welcome back.
I've been very sad lately because Traore is doing some very bad job. Why will he be giving Burkina Bees free education? I don't understand. Why will he nationalize 2 of their gold mines? It is unheard of. Why will Captain Traore, why on earth will he be sewing Burkina Bees clothes, not importing clothes from the Western colonizers? In fact, since yesterday, I've been crying to our imperialists, to our colonialists, to come and deliver Burkina Bees from the grip of Ibrahim Traore. You see, the real crime of Traore is not the fact that he's doing a good job in Burkina Faso. His real crime is that what is happening in Burkina Faso could be replicated all across the continent of Africa. And that is why they want to silence him. Because democracy to the imperialists, to these colonialists, is like what we had in Niger before the junta took over. You remember? France was purchasing Nigerian uranium at 80 cents per kilogram. and selling it at 200 euros. 200 euros per kilogram, which is quite outrageous. So anybody who is not doing their bidding and who will make Africans wake up to their exploitation is always will always be at loggerhead with these guys. Look at Cameroon. Paul Biya has been the president of Cameroon for more than 40 years. You never hear anybody call Paul Biya a dictator. It's democratic as far as they have access to the resources of Cameroon. Nigeria that I come from, George, an incident happened in October 2022 in Nigeria. One guy did some investigation or something like this, revealed that the oil theft in Nigeria is not being done by, the local guys. That is multinationals, international people coming to Nigeria, taking the crude oil for free. Do you know what the government of the day did? In fact, one reputable news media in Nigeria then, in October, carried this news. It was all over the news. The government of the day then, the government of General Buhari, suspended all oil lifting in Nigeria for investigation. George, in less than 2 weeks, U.S. consulate in Abuja, in Nigeria, issued Boko Haram threat against the Nigerian capital in less than 2 weeks. Then other Western consulates and embassies in Nigeria followed suit. In fact, it went so dramatic that they started evacuating their citizens from Nigeria. Do you know what happened? The investigation quieted, no Boko Haram threat. So it's quite amazing what is happening. I just hope that Africans will wake up to what is happening. And the same thing that
look, all the signs. I'll tell you what, Ola, I need to hurry you on because of the hour. It's a brilliant call. I think they are. There were hundreds of thousands at the rally today in defense of and support of Captain Traore. And the Russians have bolstered his personal security, and with special forces, I think he's considerably more safe now than he was before from assassination from whomsoever. The feel that I have, admittedly only in social media, I'm not in Africa at the present, but the feel I have is that the African continent is standing up. It has kneeled down for long enough. It recognizes the greatness of Traore, walking in the shoes of Thomas Sankara, walking in the spirit of Kwame Nkrumah and Patrice Lumumba and other great sons of Africa. And the continent is standing up. And it is looking askance at the likes of Tinubu in your country, a geriatric crook, president of Nigeria, and looking at other, like the Cameroon, 40-year walking corpse. He lives in France, the president of Cameroon. He only comes back for the elections, which are in any case totally rigged. The people of Africa know. They look at him. They look at Tinubu. And then they look at Traore. And they definitely prefer the latter. So I have a feel, if I get the chance to talk to the captain in Moscow, I'm going to take his permission to internationalize this question. Of course, the primary responsibility lies with the Burkinabe people themselves and with the Africans themselves, but let's have a great, virtuous, peaceful, international brigade. Let's all go to Burkina Faso and make ourselves useful. At least, if only spend our money there, but hopefully do more than that. Let's have an international brigade in defense of Captain Ibrahim. That's what I'm going to say to him in Moscow next week if I get the chance. Now, it's Victory Day, of course, everywhere, although only some places will be celebrating it, and only some places, namely Moscow, will they be celebrating it properly, except at our Victory Day celebration in London on the 10th of May at Bolivar Hall, Grafton Street, London, from 12 noon until 4 p.m. Lots of brilliant speakers, including me on the screen from Red Square, Moscow. You don't want to miss that. To mark Victory Day and the defeat of Hitler fascism next Saturday, 10th of May, Bolivar Hall, Grafton Street, London, 12 noon till 4 p.m. Let's go to the social media news roundup, although remotely this time. What's rattling, Gayatri?
First of all, let's start with salutations in memory and movement of the 50th anniversary of the Vietnamese people. I am sharing the pride and the joy of the people in Vietnam. 50 years ago today, the U.S. empire ran with its tails between its legs. The great victory of April 30th represents the triumph of the entire nation, of justice over brutality and of humanity over tyranny. These were the words of Ho Chi Minh, also known as Uncle Ho, our Uncle Ho. And it actually, 50 years on, not just stands for their victory, it is an inspiration for all the struggles around the world, from the Arab world, from Africa. We are hearing salutations for today's Victory Day. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but the parades was humongous, was beautiful, and schools, nurseries, they were all enacting how they broke the gates and the country was reunited. It was a sight to behold, and I hope that we go to Vietnam soon together as well to see Vietnam in modern days as Ho Chi Minh has envisioned it, developed and advanced.
Amen. Amen. Anything going down on the poll? Virginia Giuffre?
Yes.
Not a big poll, 16,654, but overwhelmingly. Nobody seems to believe she committed suicide. What are people saying?
No. Did Virginia Giuffre commit suicide? The answer is no. She did not commit suicide. Daryl Israel replies, if they have changed the definition of suicide to dying by the hidden hand of the powerful elite in suspicious circumstances that cannot be explained to everyone with half a brain, then suicide it must be. They've changed the definition of quite a few things in recent years to fit their agenda, so this might turn out to be such a glib response after all. And Kafil says there is no reason for her to commit suicide now. If she really was suicidal, she would have committed it when she was, when the criminals child abused her. As you said before, she's had a very horrific childhood, horrific experience. And finally, James Halpin says, no, she did not kill herself. Other people killed her. She can only be thankful that in the UK that the kid Starmer is not in charge of public prosecution, because his desk was highly polished. In fact, it was so polished that some of the tackiest files just slipped right off his desk, and sadly he never had a chance to read them. So that's on the poll.
Very good. Well, you're not here, so no chips for you tonight. Thank you very much for that social media roundup. And that's the end of the show. But God willing, on Sunday at the same time, you can catch the mothership, the Sunday mother of all talk shows, and bring another viewer with you. We've slipped back to the high 3 million mark, and you know how proud I was to be over 4 million viewers per week with the mother of all talk shows. Help me, get me back to 4 million on Sunday. Thanks for watching.
It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. It's the mother of all talk shows. Go get 'em, George.